Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, September 16th. Back kind of to my normal schedule of being a little bit later in the morning as far as streaming, at least for today. Apparently there's a lot changing really fast. Let's see. Forbidden list, limited list changes. See. Forbidden list will be color labeled as follow: blue cards for which the maximum number of copies is decreased. White is cards where the maximum number of cards is increased. Cards to be forbidden completely would be Christ John, Halacorbrax. Cards which will be limited would be Water Enchantress of the Temple. And then let's go back and understand this. White means cards for which the maximum number has been increased. Blue is decreased. So this one is being decreased down to semi-limited, meaning it can have 2 copies, while this one is being increased. Each of these are being increased. This is a significant change compared to the last change, which I thought was going to be the big change, which they really only changed like 3 or 4 cards. Now all of a sudden the floodgates may have broken and the dam may have fallen, and it seems like changes may come very fast and very possibly too fast. These 2 cards, Beginning of the End and Harmonizing Magician, they're going to just be lifted completely back to 3. And inherently that is a problem, certainly. That is definitely a problem if things start changing drastically. I just spent the last bits of my crafting points crafting a new deck, and if the meta almost certainly will drastically change with this amount of changes. Even if only 2 or 3 cards had been changed, if it's the right 2 or 3 cards had been banned or changed in any amount, that's going to definitely change the meta. So I may very well have wanted to wait to make a new deck until there was more understanding, certainly, as to what the new meta was going to be and how long the new meta was going to last. Certain cards such as Pot of Greed that are forbidden under the current standard forbidden will be able to be generated from the following date. So let's see. Pot of Greed, when they mean generated, I assume they mean generated by crafting. So it almost seems like you can't craft Pot of Greed right now at all. Or you can only craft Pot of Greed right now, and on the 30th you can't craft it anymore. Both of which seems really weird. On top of that, a new structured deck seems to be on its way. And more Forbidden Limited elements are happening, although this one is on the 15th. So it basically feels like, for a game that has really not done any Forbidden Limited changes at all for 6 months, now it seems like they potentially are setting themselves up to do it every 15 days, which would be far too frequent. Let's check out something here. We want to see if we can craft Pot of Greed right now. Which would be... which one of these? I imagine I own Pot of Greed being such a famous, if not the most famous card that everybody loves. No, it's not here. Let's go completely unlimited. Here we go. So you have an ultra rare Pot of Greed card here, and it says cannot generate. So there is some odd limitation here because it's banned from standard. And if anything, Pot of Greed being still banned years, if not a decade and a half since Yu-Gi-Oh started, it's been banned just because it draws 2 cards. That shows how crazy the card advantage of just having 2 cards can be. And it explains why the 1 card that you can play that will draw 2 cards also requires you to banish a massive 10 cards. Let's see. Nothing seems like it's going to change as far as extra cards and being able to dismantle some of the extra cards that we've gotten up until this point. And we have an event that's not, I think, yet here, and it's an XYZ event, so I don't know if this XYZ festival isn't pretty much the same as the XYZ festival, Synchro XYZ festival we've done before. It may be different, it probably is different. Again, we'll try to get to at least 11,000 points. After that point, you're just getting legacy packs and a title if you got all the way to the end. Getting crystals is nice, certainly, but it is a long conversion, certainly, from a gem to any crafting points, and we're so trapped around crafting points. Getting a mate is, I guess, nice for completionist's sake, but not really anything I'd ever actually use. And since the XYZ festival hasn't started yet, we are in a spot where we are already set up fairly well. I don't even know what I'm saying now. Sometimes I just start sentences and then lose track halfway through with them. Yeah, we'll just have to see how well we can do in the Synchro XYZ. Meanwhile, I guess I can play this new deck and try to go up in rank. We kinda don't have a good situation going as far as where we are in rank this month. If it is going to be the Synchro XYZ festival takes up potentially all of our gameplay time for the rest of the month, which it might. For the accountability section, I had already said that I had finished like Tacoma, and now I've finished Shank 2. And see, part of the danger certainly of playing less games is that a run of bad games is going to be felt, I think, a lot more. And Shank 2 is definitely a bad game that I wouldn't recommend anybody play, even if you were a huge fan of the first Shank game, because I just don't feel like you are Shank 2 just kind of sucks. Like, there's really nothing to it. There's just not, like, a good experience to be had there. It has 6 levels, and the levels get increasingly harder as they go. It is bizarrely odd in that there are no female enemies in the first 3 levels, pretty much. I'm fairly certain you don't see a single female enemy until you get to like the 3rd level, and then you start to see female enemies quite often, so it just feels like a completely different team did those first couple levels. It's not like there's even much of a big twist or introduction on it. The game is incredibly hard with no easy mode, so you have to play it on normal, and then if you really want to unlock all the skins, you have to beat it on hard also, and you'd have to play those 6 levels multiple times. Beat 'em up games in particular haven't evolved particularly well since their heyday of something like the Simpsons arcade game, where the Simpsons arcade games and games like that were somewhat specifically designed to just steal quarters from kids, but because of that, they also had a very quick drop in and continuation to it, or at the very least they had a continue screen that was counting down from 10. In Shank 2, when you're playing the single player campaign, which is pretty much all there is, there's this 3 levels of a survival mission that you can play online that also sucks. But yeah, if you die in the single player campaign, you just die and go back to a checkpoint. There aren't quite enough checkpoints, and there's just too many waves of enemies that appear in one section, so going back to a checkpoint doesn't really help you in a lot of cases, because you're simply just going to fail at that same spot and die over and over again. You basically would have needed to be checkpointed after each wave of enemies, but sometimes enemies don't come in waves and they just come at person after person. So there definitely felt like there were times where the game was straight up just feeling sorry for me and letting me win after the 10th death in a row. Shank 2 has basically no story. I think the first Shank actually did have some stories. It's animated and acts like it's trying to be something like the animated adult cartoon Archer from FX, but if you are to actually compare it to Archer, you totally need to have way more dialogue and way more cutscenes, and there's just none of that. There's no subtitles in the game at all, which this is the first time I've seen a game without subtitles, probably in decades, or at least 1 decade. Well, it does seem like people are just gonna straight up surrender here. They've seen Floendes as a deck so much. Which, yeah, I may very well just win through intimidation, going up the ranks that way. Despite the fact that I really don't know how to play this deck, since it's pretty brand new to me as far as actually looking at the cards. Of course, that's my own fault for not looking at the opponent's cards when they're played, but I'm also just not paying attention, and never am going to pay that much attention to Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Master. Yeah, there's just a ton of stuff you would have really had to done to Shank 2 to make it really work as a good sequel. It's a little shocking that they didn't just sell Shank 2 as DLC for Shank 1. Shank 2 probably is a great example, though, of just the soft censorship or just hard censorship that happens in the game industry, even in Shank 2's case, because it's like a 2013 game, in that they are drawing, in particularly in the cutscenes, all the female characters with just skin tight clothing. They might as well be naked type clothing and very sharp angles. But yeah, not a single significant amount of cleavage or nudity is shown, and yet the game, really its only sells point is the amount of gore it's trying to show, and it's showing a significant amount of gore, both interactive in-game and in cutscene, of people's heads getting chopped off and people being disemboweled. Maybe not a huge amount of actually blood and viscera, but certainly physical violence that is undeniable. And yeah, it's a game that really only would work as an adult-only title, but they can't possibly sell the game. It's also probably one of the few last EA published games, which, when you have a game like that and it's just not successful, it's not really that surprising that EA eventually just turned into the EA we know now, which only sells sports games. The music also in Shank 2 was incredibly loud in the menu. Alright. I guess we'll keep wind. Maybe I should have kept water, but I don't think there really was a reason to do that. Shank as a character in Shank 2 is nobody, and for one level they have you play as a female character called Karina, which would be really cool and interesting if you could play as her the whole time, even in a second playthrough, but no, you can just play Karina in one of the 6 levels, and only play as Karina in one of the 6 levels. She does have a bunch of skins, but her existing and those skins existing really seemed like it was Clay Entertainment just fulfilling some contractually obliged publisher agreement. And Shank 2, I don't recall got really any advertising at all from EA. Which, if you told me Shank 2 was literally just that EA and Clay Entertainment had problems and this was them doing what was required and nothing more, I would potentially believe it. And that would explain quite a bit. Of course, that only hurts the consumer and is not something that really matters at the end of the day. As far as somebody purchasing the game is still available for sale. But yeah, suffice it to say, there just really wasn't anything to enjoy with it. It may have inspired me a little bit to go deeper down the beat 'em up style of gameplay and try something like River City Girls, which I was already fairly excited about as far as River City Girls anyways. So I might move that up ahead of schedule, but that probably would mean I would have to actually buy the game, which, yeah, buying games at this point doesn't make the most amount of sense. YouTube is changing its rules somewhat, and I haven't seen the exact rules. It's changing the wording of what kind of adult content they'll allow on their websites, on YouTube. without getting community guideline strikes. Inherently, I don't know if enforcement's really going to change much, or if the rules are really changing that much, but it seems to be what they're implying is that they're trying to open it up more towards big business being allowed to show more nudity, while still really screwing over anybody who is making new content, but new content in the field of adult content almost certainly would get excluded. But yeah, the wording around it seems to be heavily that, like, if you were showing a clip from a movie, or in my opinion, I think this probably also includes video games, if you're showing something created by somebody else and you weren't overly emphasizing on the adult content, that they potentially are going to be a little bit more lenient. But they specifically said if you're, say, buying sex toys and doing a sex toy review, a YouTube channel, you still are going to have to toe a very tight line, because they are not going to really tolerate you doing a lot with a sex toy in a sex toy review show. Which isn't to say you couldn't do it, you're just going to have to be very cold and scientific about it. You're not going to be able to. I have thought that they were going to destroy that because it was flipped down, face down. But yeah, there might be some slight changes. But what I'm looking for as far as a video game reviewer is that if I play something like The Witcher 3 that had sex scenes and nudity in it, do I feel an extra need now or less of a need? Or do I feel more confident that I can get away with not going out of my way to edit out entire sections and not even describe the scenes, or not have to blur the whole thing? Remember, the last major instance that I've heard about as far as enforcement of adult content would be MXR Plays channel getting content family-friendly guidelines struck, and then them appealing it, and that was a couple months ago, and then the appeal being rejected. So yeah, it kind of doesn't even matter what's in the text. It probably will take at least 6 months before the people doing the work get retrained, if they ever get retrained, as to what the new rules are. Inherently, what we would really like as a YouTube creator, I think, is all YouTube creators would love to have a ruling council of some sort that was made up of content creators that looked at the appeals and actually cared and tried to get it right as far as appeals, instead of having a bunch of people, I assume in India, just very quickly rejecting all appeals. And at a certain level, if they just manually only went through manual submissions and manual complaints instead of trying to have it be automated, they would almost certainly be in a better position anyways. Okay. set this. Send that to the graveyard. Send that to the graveyard. Then in the turn, because we know this guy has a lot of defense, or I'm fairly certain this guy has like 2,000 defense, so nothing I attack is going to work there. But yeah, it would be interesting certainly if there were some changes there. YouTube is promising a few changes as far as the YouTube desktop YouTube page hubs, trying to improve those, and so maybe in 6 months to a year we'll start to see some improvements there. Not that many people ever go to a creator's main YouTube page because it's so de-emphasized and subscriptions are so de-emphasized. Inherently, I would like to see other changes made on YouTube that would be way more useful and impactful. Like, go the full way of not caring about subscriptions if you don't care about subscriptions, and just let people with a certain amount of watch time get into the YouTube Partner Program. That inherently may not even put me as still qualifying at that point, but I'd be way closer to qualifying to be in the YouTube Partner Program if the requirement for watch time was exclusive and not on top of 1,000 subscribers, which it's hard to get 1,000 subscribers when the entire system is designed to not really push people to choose subscribe. On top of all of that, what will affect viewers of YouTube, of which there are way more, is they seem to be testing out 5 to 10 unskippable ads on YouTube before video starts, which that is a ridiculously high amount of videos, and something that I don't know if creators are going to be able to opt out of in any real way, if they really were going to take that to the full direction. I don't know what inherently gets rid of Susan Wojcicki, though. And that's the problem, is we need a new leadership. We need just, even if nothing that's wrong with YouTube was ever Susan Wojcicki's fault, she needs to go just so somebody new comes in and tries something different. But YouTube as a channel has never been profitable. So anything short of just another adpocalypse or another major controversy, anything short of that, I think lets Susan Wojcicki keep her job. And I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube is mostly focused even now just around elections in the United States and what impact or effect they will have on elections in the United States. And ideally, they would like to, I imagine they'd like to have some impact to get the politicians most people at YouTube would want to get elected, but they also might very well just want to have no impact and have nobody make an accusation of YouTube being a major player in an election or affecting an election one way or the other, particularly if an election goes badly. Moving on, Revolution Software apparently put an update for Broken Sword 2, and people have really loved it. I guess it's a cloud saves, 40% file save size reduction, and Steam Deck compatibility, which that's really not a lot of changes, but I imagine that's pretty much all Revolution software has too. Inherently, the I'm saying that word too often. Broken Sword 2 was pretty much the last good Broken Sword in my opinion, so I wouldn't like they kind of have to live off that nostalgia quite a bit. Because yeah, Broken Sword 3 and 4 and 5 all had problems. Go ahead and activate this. I want to see if I can destroy this card by putting it face down. No, I can't. So that was a waste of a Book of the Moon card. Alright, well. Attack here with that one. Don't discard the card to reduce the attack. Attack here with that one. And in the turn. Meanwhile, YouTube's blogs are talking about other things. Particularly, they're talking and pushing the idea about how people are learning things and being educated through YouTube, which, yeah, I imagine there are some people that do some of that, and I guess I do that with like makerspace stuff all the time, but the vast majority of what I look at on YouTube is of zero educational value completely. I definitely wouldn't consider YouTube a real source of education, or even a good source of information in general, because there's just too many people that get things completely wrong. Which, yeah, speaking of people that get things wrong, I listened to the next Bombcast after the last one that I listened to, and Jeff Grubb just actively saying the wrong things as far as obnoxiously, stupidly claiming that the Xbox version of GoldenEye was going to also have the online multiplayer, and people on the live chat are having to actively say no, that's not accurate, no, that's wrong, and it's not until like the third or fourth person comment is read on chat by another presenter does he even start to listen to the other presenter and get the hint, which almost certainly means he wasn't looking at some kind of internal messaging system that they should have, where the on-air presenter could have corrected him on the chat without him looking like a complete idiot. But no, he just sounds like a complete idiot. And this is the person who is desperately being set up by Giant Bomb, or setting himself up as a Jason Schreier like newsman who's gonna have to be 100% accurate about breaking news and around video games, and he just doesn't have it within him. He doesn't have the honesty of what an actual journalist needs, and the ability to admit when he doesn't know something that actual journalists require. So yeah, Giant Bomb has hung their hat with effectively a known liar. I mean, it's an extreme word to use, certainly, but that's what he is. He is flippant with the truth, and being flippant with the truth as a news journalist is effectively the same as lying. And yeah, you just can't make claims and just assume things and make things up in your head and just be that flippant. People like that are super annoying to almost everybody except for people like that. And very often people like that are flippant with the truth, and the reality is just whatever they make up in their mind. Even they are annoyed when they see other people do that. And a lot of people do that fairly frequently and don't realize they're doing it, but it is a problem, to say the least, and something that cannot be tolerated in news, in journalism. So I guess that confirms my suspicions about Jeff Grubb, that yeah, he's just not that good. Speaking of other mainstream video game journalists who aren't that good, seems like pretty much everybody, I'm going to exaggerate here because I don't have any real names or numbers, and at least not I don't want to become the same kind of person flippant with the things. I've seen from other news sources there's been some major layoffs at G4, and everybody who has talked about it and has basically said, well, what is G4 anyways in a modern world? Because nobody really understands what this new G4 is, and there just really isn't any content on the new G4 that can't be easily copied by other people. So had G4 maintained itself as one of the major news sources for video games and having a TV channel and or just having a presence anywhere, had G4 eventually just been canceled and turned into Spike TV, but then the G4 X-Play and Attack of the Show series stayed alive on YouTube channels, or even maybe not as video but as podcasts, or as even printed word articles, had there been any maintained presence there, they would have a chance to compete. But starting over from scratch, they set themselves up at a significant disadvantage, with there being really no benefit to look at G4 compared to looking at any other of the many YouTube channels that review video games out there. Now, I think about like maybe the video game nerd, like instead of the completionist. Had he been part of G4, would it really have changed much? And probably not, because the video game nerd also doesn't really care about being the video game nerd anymore. Yeah. I don't know who you really could have brought in that would have changed the situation. You probably would have had to throw just a ridiculous amount of money, not bringing back Adam Sessler, but well, probably bringing back Adam Sessler, but really just hiring a much larger group of people, and almost trying to create a web ring or something of people. If you could have gotten, say, the completionists, game grumps, angry video game nerds, Video Game Donkey, PewDiePie, if you could have brought just almost everybody together and said, we're all working for G4 now, and we're getting support in the back end, and we're getting better cameras, and we're going to have a consistent style, and just almost have Twitch raids in which we push people to different channels. Maybe there would have been a slight change in the outcome here. There is a weirdness here that this is probably the 4th or 5th time there's been some significant indication that G4 is dead on arrival. And it will almost certainly just always pewter out and fizzle out and not really become it probably won't ever become a final finished product so much, because that almost would then repeat the mistake of the previous G4. Like, G4 in name at least needs to still stay around, but I could see it just becoming something completely different. But also, at a certain point, something not succeeding has really stopped becoming video game news. It stops becoming relevant. The Tech TV people in This Week in Tech Twit, they are obviously going to be the closest comparison, and the This Week in Technology podcasts are still around and still exist and still doing their thing, and that centers really around Leo Laporte and his wife just running the business and wanting the business to keep on running. Meanwhile, like, plenty of people have come and gone, and plenty of shows have been started and canceled around the Leo Laporte podcast empire, and their shows now are pretty much 100% remote, in which Leo Laporte is actually in a studio that really should be shut down at this point, and then they're just pointing cameras to TVs that are connected via Skype to all the other characters. And the Tech TV remnants that still exist, that is probably what G4 should have been, is just something that stays around, or the same concept stays around. And then perhaps Tech TV did it a little bit better because they tried new shows. They didn't just try to do the same things that were on Tech TV before Tech TV and G4 merged, and then G4 effectively destroyed Tech TV. Arguably, the new G4 should have probably gone back and said, hey, let's get some people on our channel that are more about tech and less about gaming, because there's really not that much to talk about gaming alone, and PC gaming's pretty hot now. So if you could get somebody like Linus Tech Tips to all of a sudden be your half of your shows, and the LTT group be half of your shows, that would potentially work fairly well. I wouldn't be surprised if Linus Tech Tips managed to have enough money to buy out G4 if once it's completely failed. But yeah, there should be somebody doing some level of computer or PC gaming at the very least, if not tech in general. But yeah, the Tech TV podcast series at least has tried new channels. They had OMG Chad, who is also a failed YouTuber at this point, making a whole Minecraft series, and letting that go for fairly longer than it really should. And I'd say OMG Chat is now a failure, and who am I to speak? He's got probably way more subscribers and views than me, but he's really boiled down to just kind of barely making any content around Minecraft, and really just trying to get enough views to stay relevant and stay in the partner program. I'd say OMG Chad in particular, being such a young creator, really needed somebody to kick his butt and push him to continue to make content. And because he didn't get that support at the end of Tech TV, and they just let him take the set and make his own independent show, like he was left to his own devices, which effectively meant that he was left to not have any real support. I'm kind of just rambling here at this point. We've got a lot of news. Romancing Saga, A Scarlet Grace Minstrel Song Remastered has been announced, coming out December 1st on Steam. I wanted to mention that. I also wanted to mention, much more interesting to me, that No More Heroes 3 is coming out October 11th, which on PC and on Steam. That opens the door, I assume, to No More Heroes 2 already being on Steam, and it eliminates any real excuses to not go ahead and play the No More Heroes series. Summon this. Place this here. Can we activate this now? Return that to the deck. Apparently I'm returning two things to the deck. Let's go ahead and activate this. Something here has to work, I imagine. Go ahead and just banish that, I guess. Normal summon that. Well, it doesn't seem like those all worked. Let me just attack here and hope that I can activate this effect by tossing that. And I don't think I can do anything else. So yeah, No More Heroes 2 Desperate Struggle is on Steam. It is mixed. But at this point, I think I probably would just make an exception there. It would really suck if there's just never been an update and the game just runs really terribly. But yeah, poor level designs, repetitive combat, bosses have like 2 or 3 attacks. Seems almost like nobody even knows what No More Heroes is. unpredictable crashes make it annoying to play. They removed the map free roam from the first title. So it might inherently just be a case that No More Heroes 2 is just not as well received. But it does seem like it's a bad port, and so hopefully that would be fixed in the third game, but who knows. So there is, I guess, a small excuse and a small reason perhaps to still not play No More Heroes 1 and work your way down the path of playing all the three of them. No More Heroes 1 is a grindy enough game if you want to unlock everything, that playing number 1 right now and then waiting 6 months to a year to play number 2 gives it a decent amount of time to potentially get around any real problems. Use this effect, send this to the graveyard, and then send that to the graveyard. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. Let's see. We had already talked about it, but Judgment and Lost Judgment are mature rated games, so I won't be doing a YouTube short around them, so I wanted to once again just mention that they are out. Director of Engineering David Berger is said to be leaving Halo Studio 343. We'd already talked about that too. The Tokyo Game Show happened, but I don't know if, particularly from Video Games Chronicle articles, we already talked about this also, if we are going to really get anything from the UK-based Video Games Chronicles around the Tokyo Game Show events. Or it could also be a case that the Tokyo Game Show has started, but it's really more of an over-the-weekend thing, and we're not going to see all the announcements until Monday. I was expecting a lot more news, but it doesn't seem like we're really going to see it. This guy's still trying to win, which is admirable and the right move, particularly playing against me, because I don't know what I'm doing. That being said, this deck does seem fairly easy to figure out and play. It doesn't feel anywhere as complicated as the Zodiac deck, but that may very well be a case of just me not playing correctly and not learning anything as compared to the Zodiac deck. And I guess the good news is I have yet to see any of these cards being indicated as some of the cards that are going to be eliminated. Let's see what this does. Pretty much all the special summons in this deck are around random actions, because everything in the extra deck was really just garbage stuff. Normal summon this monster. I very possibly have played out of order here. Well, that seems like that's something. Is that really what I want to do? Yeah, 28 would kill this. Is he activating this? We already talked about The Sims 4 going free to play in October. I kind of am more leaning towards the idea that this may be the end of the Sims series, because it really feels like they would have announced that they were working on a Sims 5. Also, there was fairly a long gap. There was a pretty long gap between Sims 3 and Sims 4, which they also were indicating that they're not really going to make a Sims 4. Also, it was, I believe, Sims 3 that tried to come out and have the always online requirements and made Sims 3 such a bad game, if I recall correctly. So, of 4 games, you have 4 which has gotten a lot of support and managed to succeed because of all of that support. And then you have 3, which I don't think people liked ever. And then you have 1 and 2, which I think were fairly well beloved. There is a certain level also, just to point out, is just how long the Sim series has been in general. Interesting. No battle damage, bunch of attacks, 2+ affect monsters. Yeah, so this and this, or this and this. See, that seems like that's not enough. I think that's probably because the link requirement. Destroy a card that the opponent controls. And that didn't work. So it's just in the turn there. No, I guess I should have activated his effect again. Didn't realize I was going to destroy him at the end. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says the Xbox Activision deal will reportedly set for in-depth probes in the UK and Europe, which I still suspect doesn't mean much of anything. The Stranger Things star David Harbour is going to be in the Gran Turismo movie, which doesn't really have much to do with the video game at all. Like, having Gran Turismo in the title and then having a, I assume, Need for Speed type ripoff movie with the Stranger Things actor is almost certainly not going to actually connect to the Gran Turismo racing game, which how could it really, because I don't think there really is any story to the Gran Turismo racing game in the first place. Let's see, new Xbox Game Pass titles announced, and Valheim has been dated. Let's see if we can get exact dates here. Not easily. Seems to be The Walking Dead. It's the first season. The Big Con. And I don't even know what those two are. Humble Games Moon Scars. Rainbow Billy. Skybound. Still don't really know what that one is. Alright, so we lost on that game, but that's not really even a big deal, because we've been doing fairly well otherwise. So yeah, more Xbox Game Pass games, which I do think the Xbox Game Pass service is a decent service if you are of a certain age. It really, to me, strikes fairly well if you're giving it to a 14 to 18 year old. Even maybe you would push it from 18-year-old up to, let's say, a 25-year-old. Because at the age of 14, you probably aren't going to care if your kids are playing mature games, and the Xbox Game Pass service doesn't make any sense at all unless you're willing to let them play mature games. Which, again, you have to remember there are technically adults-only games, but they pretty much don't exist on consoles and Xbox. And having that throughout your high school, middle school time, and that being a way to get a lot of games without having to spend a lot of money makes a lot of sense. Although inherently the social dynamic of playing video games may be lost out by getting the Games Pass service, because you have to either convince your friends to play those other Game Pass games, which might be hard, instead of playing the brand new AAA games that everybody might be playing, or going back to playing something like Halo or whatever the touchstone games of your generation might be. And then once you get out of high school, if you're going to college or just starting a new life at an apartment, living what is frankly an increasing fantasy of actually just moving out of your house after high school in any way, you probably are a little broken and short on space if you're in an apartment or a dorm. So it still would kind of make a lot of sense to get the Xbox Game Pass. After about 24, 25, then you might be potentially in a job situation where you want to just play games, but you don't want to go through the hassle of knowing what new games are out there, or you don't want to go to stores to buy games. Then even then it might make a lot of sense. But that inherently implies that even at 25 you're never going to move over to being a more informed gamer, or a PC gamer in particular. But it definitely is taking choice away from you, and it is also offering what is effectively rental service. So if you were to rephrase the Xbox Game Pass service as saying, would you be willing in modern times to spend what is probably somewhere around $20+ a month renting video games? If the answer to that question is yes, then you're fine. If the answer to that question is a resounding no, then you should probably reevaluate things. And inherently, what I tried to explain in the last stream, and probably didn't do a very good job of it, is it's not like other bills haven't also been created on top of the idea of a Game Pass service. So you're probably also paying for things like Disney Plus or Netflix, Amazon Prime, things like that, all of which eat away at your extra entertainment budget, if you have any kind of extra entertainment budget at all. That was probably the wrong one to play. Let's see. Moving on. Modern Warfare 2 video shows off updated weapon customization system, which I guess if you care about Modern Warfare 2, check that out. I don't. Sable is coming to the PS5 with new content and features. I seem to recall, though, that Sable as a game played pretty badly from what I heard. It most definitely didn't have a lot of people singing its praises when it came out. Inherently, that is still the problem that I'm running into, and maybe that there should just be a Metacritic type page that I should check out, which that's an interesting idea. Certainly is. Can I see? Can I find Metacritic or OpenCritic pages that would effectively be doing something like the reviews on Steam? So I could find some central information around that. Let's see. Looking at OpenCritic, here you have like Ninja Turtles Cowabunga, which OpenCritic has 74 reviews, and it really is just reviewers. And that's really not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for individuals who would review a game, and I just don't think that there's really a website like that, which arguably maybe there should be a website like that that is for the people, by the people. One of the problems that has been revealed to me is the reviews on Steam games, particularly small Steam games, might be slightly corrupted in that you have fake curators who are potentially not actually playing the games and then putting a cut and paste positive review down for the game, and then what they're doing is establishing that they have reviewed a bunch of games with just a few of them being negative reviews, so they look like a good curator. And the whole goal there is then they contact game publishers to get free keys for newer games. But the whole system is basically built up on lies, because they're not actually playing the game and they're not actually reviewing it. They're just putting fake reviews that are mostly positive. Inherently, that's probably the problem with most sites, is that there's a bunch of fake positive reviews. Almost certainly there's way more fake positive reviews than there are fake negative reviews out there. But that does highlight what could happen, is that you would have a small indie game that has 30 reviews, which is my limit, and potentially 15 of those could be positive from people who never actually played the game. And that's certainly not something I had ever considered before recently. Come on, are we gonna be able to play? See what happens if we banish that card. Then normal summon that card. And activate that effect. Sky is down to 2000, so theoretically I could, if I could get somebody's attack down really low. Not knowing what I was doing, I think I may have succeeded there. If I get this guy's health down to 1700, it's probably not good enough. This guy doesn't do... damage on defense position people. Let's see what activating this effect will do. Oops. I guess field spells always get sent downward. Alright, so there's pretty much nothing I can do here. So I attack here. Activate this effect. Banish this card. That leaves him with 300 health. That's gonna try and activate something. Seemingly I can't chain link anything here. Yeah, I think you just leave it at that. Looking in Metacritic here, if we, I guess we'll just click on Splatoon 3. Metacritic does have user scores, whereas OpenCritic doesn't, which I feel like is ironic. Doesn't seem like to put a review score you do much more than pick a number. But you can also do user reviews. So, by user score, you can see current Switch games. Could I find games This does not want to cooperate with me at all, does it? I'm too zoomed in for that to work. New releases. It's a new releases, expand, user scores. I think Metacritic limits user scores after the first 2 weeks, which also potentially means anything with a new release is going to be different. Here we have NBA 2K23 with the user scores being considerably lower than the Metascore of 83. Steel Rising here being considerably higher than this. So this might be a page worth checking out. A lot of expanding would be required, certainly. And there still seems like there'd be some fairly big problems if I was going to use this as a general source. Soul Hackers 2 getting about the average score. But even at that, they have entirely different score systems where it's 0.1 digit for users and it's 0 to 100 instead of 0.0 to 10.0 on the user scores. But I guess that makes it fairly easy. They also have squares versus circles. I guess maybe generously saying that the professional critics are the squares, although being called a square nowadays doesn't really mean anything. It's not an insult like it used to be. Yeah. Digimon 5 pretty in line. So yeah, there is a potential room for improvement of just like understanding what the general user scores are on Metacritic. And I guess if Metacritic is already doing user scores, the idea of making a website that also does user scores would be redundant. Unless you were going to very much just be anti-mainstream video game journalism and only have user scores. But even at that, it's probably something that Reset Error would just immediately attack for some reason. They'd find a reason, almost certainly. I didn't realize that Ni no Kuni never came to the Xbox. So I guess it had been a PlayStation exclusive and a Switch exclusive. I recently played Ni no Kuni, and honestly, I can't recommend playing it. It's a bad JRPG, in my opinion, that pretends like it has amazing Studio Ghibli animation and storyline, when really Studio Ghibli's involvement was very minimal in the game, and the actual game and storyline is not particularly kid-friendly enough that I'd think a Western kid would enjoy playing it. Plus the game is way too grindy. It's not inappropriate for a little kid to play, from what I recall, but it just wouldn't be fun for a kid to play. And it's in no way really adult friendly, so like you could pretty much pick any Final Fantasy game or any adult RPG, any Monster Hunter game, and suggest that over Ni no Kuni. Right. Summon this. Get some more cards back. If I can get 2100, I can win, unless these traps stop me. Let's see if Book of the Moon does something for us. Oh, that was called by the grave anyways. I'm still not sure how this cross-out designator works. Declare one card name. I guess Max C. Deathloop is coming to Xbox Game Pass next week, which we'd already talked about that. That's another game that was overhyped and then didn't really seem like people actually cared about it. Actual gamers. Okay. Banish that card. I feel like Crossout Designator actually is a card I should have banished. Is a card I should have used to banish one of these Floandre's cards. That would make some sense. Instead of banishing Max C. Yeah, I think that makes way more sense as to how that card is supposed to work. Assassin's Creed Odyssey joins Xbox Game Pass today, which, yeah, I'm gonna be so late to the party that I can easily see never playing 6 out of potentially, well, more than half of all the Assassin's Creed games that have ever been made. I'm not particularly interested in even really playing the most recent Assassin's Creed games. So I may very well just be done with the series completely. Yeah, again, I guess the question comes down to, should I be banishing one type of thing, or should I be banishing a different type of thing? Let's see, Overwatch 2 reveals a new hero in the Season 1 Battle Pass details. A lot of this just feels like old news. A Star Ocean The Divine Force demo is coming to PlayStation and Xbox next week. Which, yeah. Star Ocean The Divine Force is not really a game I think I've heard of. UK Watchdog officially launching a probe into the Xbox Activision deal. The Resident Evil 4 remake is also coming to PS4, and a showcase is happening next month, which you can almost certainly predict that will be the point where we start to see some potential complaints about what gets changed and what doesn't get changed in a louder volume as far as Resident Evil 4, because they really are setting themselves up to make a completely different game and call it Resident Evil 4. And it will just be a question as to whether people are willing to live with that, or whether that or whether they'll rebel against a new Resident Evil 4. Sniper Ranger is on the chat, and he says he wants an XCOM 3, which I guess that means there isn't an XCOM 3. I haven't followed the XCOM series well enough to know how many XCOMs there are. I know that if I'm recalling correctly, there's quite a lot of spin-offs and DLCs and standalone spin-off games from XCOM 1. So it's not as simple as there was an XCOM 1 and an XCOM 2. There was, I think, 3 or 4 other XCOM colon somethings. And I personally have never really found a lot of enjoyment in the turn-based positional placement strategy types of games. I tried to play a game called Disgaea that plays like that, and I was just bored out of my mind very quickly. It's one thing video games have a tendency, I need to actually play it, come to think of it. One thing video games have a tendency to do is speed up actions and interactions, and turn-based gameplay tends not to benefit from that as much as it probably should. This guy may kill me. I probably should put him in defense mode, but then I wouldn't have been able to use his abilities. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Street Fighter 6 new trailer shows off classic characters in World Tournament mode. Which, yeah, they're trying to get people hyped on Street Fighter 6. But as a person who was never really a fan of the Street Fighter series, this looks very, very different from Street Fighter 2. And yeah, I'm not feeling it, really. I really feel like, particularly for the Street Fighter series, they should have stayed with the flat 2D animation style of Street Fighter 2 and only slightly improved throughout different iterations and never gone 3D. Or if they were going to go 3D, they needed to be fairly... They needed to try to make it look like the 2D animation a lot more. The characters that I've seen in Street Fighter 6 also are just way too muscly. It's getting ridiculous how muscly these characters are. Sony welcomes the UK watchdog's decision to further probe in the Activision Blizzard deal, which no surprise there. Sony obviously is going to try and play as hardball as they can. The Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection finally has a PC release date, October 19th. This is Uncharted 4 and Uncharted Lost Legacy, though. So one Nathan Drake game and one of the female characters game. Should I use this? Probably not. Let's see. Unaffected by the effects of whole normal traps. This card is normal summon, you can add one whole trap. The Street Fighter 6 closed beta is set for next month, which, yeah. Here you have not quite as muscly characters, but far too bright. Doesn't really feel like they have a consistent color palette here. This seems really extreme. Maybe there's some smartness in having the background pretty dark, but having the foreground characters completely glow looks really weird. Yeah, looks like it's a game that very easily is going to have far too much flash for its own good. Whereas you might look at the screenshot of Warzone 2, where these guys are, this guy is in camouflage and kind of dark, and the blue stands out a little bit, but the skin and all of that is not drastically different from the background, and that makes the background feel more like a single universe blended in. So yeah, I definitely feel like this image is way more thought out than the other image. The actual story here says a Warzone 2 map name and all of its points of interest have reportedly been revealed. If you care about that, check it out. I don't. Okay. I feel like you probably want this on the field. What does this do? Let's see. The Epic Game Store has announced its next free titles. Let's see. Is it going to be Ark? Yeah, Ark Survival Evolved and Gloomhaven will be available for free between September 22nd and 29th. I have to keep on playing here. Interesting. That's all I could do? I would have sworn I would have been able to do more than that. Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer and Warzone 2.0 revealed, swimming, third-person mode, and more. Check out that article at Video Games Chronicles if you're interested. I am not. Warzone's 2.0 release date is November 16th. Again, check out that article if you're interested. Sokoden 1 and 2 remasters have been officially revealed, which I don't think that was a particularly well kept secret. I feel like that had been rumored at the very least for at least 2 or 3 weeks. But we have about 5 more Video Games Chronicle articles, and not really any of this is coming from the Tokyo Game Show, which either again means that the Tokyo Game Show is going to have more announcements over the weekend, or the UK-based Video Games Chronicles just didn't bother to report on anything shown at the Tokyo Game Show. It is also possible that all the announcements have happened at the Tokyo Game Show, and they were just trailers for games that had already been announced elsewhere. Which that doesn't make a lot of sense, that there would be a Nintendo Direct and a PlayStation State of Play the day before Tokyo Game Show. Some of the games I talked about in the last stream were from the PlayStation State of Play more than I realized, so I may have been a little bit more negative around the PlayStation State of Play than it deserved, particularly in contrast to the large amount of like farming simulator games that were announced at the Nintendo Direct that really didn't matter. Maybe it really was just a case that I was blinded and dazzled by the fact that the Nintendo Direct talked about a lot of games while not actually announcing that many new games or games that potentially are going to be that good. Let's see. If I attribute some in this, can I get this later? Return to the deck. That card. Target. That card. Turn to the hand that card. Was activating that trap card smart. Let's see. Switch Online's latest Mega Drive Genesis updates adds Alicia Dragoon, Beyond Oasis and Earthworm Jim, which I don't recall Beyond Oasis or Alicia Dragoon. In a funny way, Nintendo and its online offerings are managing to offer a lot more while doing a bad job of highlighting that they're offering a lot more, because Sega games, clearly Sega doesn't want their games in the same announcement as a Nintendo 64 game. So when they're announcing like Mario Party and Nintendo 64 games, they don't announce Sega games, and when they're announcing Sega games, they're not announcing the Nintendo 64 games. But combined, you are probably getting somewhere around 3 or 4 old games of some sort on the Switch Online servers every month or so, or every time there's an update. I don't know if I can actually beat this deck. This kind of feels like a deck that I haven't seen before. And it definitely seems to be centered around a decent amount of traps. So I don't know if this really is one that you can power through. This game, Alicia and Dragoon, looks like it is a kind of Castlevania game that seems like you have a pet dragon following you. This is probably the type of game that is going to be fairly rough to play, and almost certainly doesn't have any real relevancy to it. Beyond Oasis, it's more of a top and down hack and slash game. Interesting life bars on the left and right. This might be a more action oriented experience, but also very possibly not something worth playing. And then in comparison, playing the Sega Genesis version of Earthworm Jim is probably going to be way more of an action-oriented experience than the 2 previous games. Sniper Ranger says, with the continuous spell you contribute your opponent's cards. Yes, I've done it a couple times now, so I've figured out what that does. Yeah, unless Sniper Ranger can tell me some really deep hidden secret to this deck, it seems to be like I've figured out most of what it does. Or at least the beginnings of understanding. I've gone through the first few steps of understanding what these cards do. Moving on with news, Video Game Chronicle says the Xbox boss says that now is not the right time for us to raise console prices, which he's right about that, even down to the second. Like, it is too close to Black Friday to really announce a price increase for the Xbox. I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere in January or February they announced the price increase, and changing the suggested manufacturer's suggested retail price, or the MSRP, probably won't even matter too much, because you could see there just being shortages after Black Friday, after Christmas, and there being some real world increase in prices regardless of whether Microsoft wants the price to go up or not. And there's a lot of ways they hide those kinds of price increases, by bundling and by just selling things on eBay, people selling the only available consoles on eBay. Of course, that won't make any extra money for Microsoft if the retailers or resellers are increasing their ask. If Microsoft is really looking for any level of increased income, they're almost certainly going to try and sell controllers or Games Pass services. And I could see Microsoft also being given being in a bad position to potentially raise its prices while it's trying to acquire Activision. That could be seen as anti-consumer. Wow, okay. That worked particularly well. Let's see. Video Game Chronicle says a time-limited Wulong Fallen Dynasty demo launches today. You can sample the game up until September 26th. Xbox is open to further acquisitions as it strives to be a major player, which it's interesting that they would describe themselves not as a major player even now. Elden Ring has been named the 2022 Best Game of the Japan Game Awards, which I assume that happens during and in association with the Tokyo Game Show. And yeah, that makes sense. Like, overall, I think Elden Ring definitely has a high chance of being the best game of the year, even in the West. There's not a lot of competition here. I also gave off some awards for excellence to Final Fantasy XIV, Endwalker, Ghostwire Tokyo, Horizon Forbidden West, Kirby the Forgotten Land, Lost Judgment, Pokemon Legends Arceus, and Resident Evil Village, and Sky, Children of the Light, and Tale of Arise. I also gave a Best Sales Award to Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, merging two games. Which that's an odd award to give out in the first place. It's just best sales. I guess I was recognizing it sold very highly. The Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry Award is being given to Hidetake Miyazaki, which the old saying is, once they start giving you awards, that means your career is over. So hopefully that's not the case, but always be afraid of that. Let's see. Also gave a global award for Japanese products to Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shiny Pearl. They also gave a global award for foreign products, what I typically refer to as Western games, to Call of Duty Vanguard. they gave a Game Designers Award to Inscription. Not really a lot of awards being given away, though. Which, yeah. The Japanese being withholding of praise is a stereotype, and seems to be somewhat confirmed there. Let's see. I think I want to play one more game, and then I'm going to call it. Special summoning now as a daily quest may turn out to be fairly difficult, though. Which, yeah. I guess that does paint you into this corner where if you're going to have a daily quest that's solo, you're going to have to do a solo deck. If you're going to have a special summoning daily quest, you're going to have to play something different when you have a deck that's not around special summoning. I guess I have 14 days to do this, so I could wait until the synchro experience happens, which looks like it's starting the 19th in 3 days. So, yeah. I'll just stick with the Flow Wander deck. But yeah, I'm moving fairly slow through the news today. PlayStation exclusive Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone 2 content has been revealed. Check that out at Video Games Chronicles if you're interested. And then Vince Zampella thinks EA strayed too far from what Battlefield is with 2042. They tried to do a couple things that were maybe ambitious, says the franchise boss, which probably is a generous way of excusing why 2042 didn't sell that well, while potentially ignoring his own involvement, I believe, in telling people if you don't like the game, don't buy it. Right, so add this to the hand. Only activate one of those at a time. No, actually, I complained about somebody just shooting their mouth off and being inaccurate, and when I think about it, I'm not 100% sure if Zampella was the person that said if you don't like it, don't buy it, and I am almost certain that it wasn't 2042 that he was talking about when that person, whoever that person was, said that, because they were talking about a World War II, Modern Warfare. Yeah, I'm confusing Battlefield and Modern Warfare all over the place. I did not pay enough attention, really, to know why Battlefield 2042 failed. Overall, I think the problem is that there just never was a good foundation to believe that the Halo Gamer Bros fandom, who were heavily targeted and advertised to by Microsoft, were a real fandom that was going to stay around for a long time. It's taken maybe a lot longer than I thought it would take for them to eventually just stop playing games again. But there's really no denying that both Modern Warfare and Battlefield have just become stagnant and stale with their many iterations, and the player base that they expected to show up either moved on to things like Destiny and Destiny 2, or just moved on with their life and stopped playing video games. Sniper Ranger is saying fix the deck. What do you specifically mean by fix the deck? This is literally your deck and your suggestions. So give me either a very specific thing that I can go look at, or we're gonna just have to live with what it is, and we're probably gonna have to live with what it is because I am not in the mood to craft new cards or make changes anymore. Looking at Gamatsu articles, finally. Shirone, the Dragon Girl, is coming to the Switch on September 29th. You have an anime Dragon Girl sitting on her tail. That's pretty much all they're saying it's an adventure game. Kazuna AI, Touch the Beat for PS5 and PS4, has a debut trailer. You may burn through a lot of these because these may not be much of announcements. Cosmic Fantasy Collection launches December 15th in Japan. It includes Cosmic Fantasy Adventure Boy U and Cosmic Fantasy 2 Adventure Boy Van bundled for the Switch. Let's activate this just to get rid of it. But yeah, this looks like an early 90s animation style of characters, for sure. But the actual game... Yeah, this almost certainly is an old game. It's just an 8-bit RPG type game. In a lot of ways, as a fan who is kind of coming from the anime side more than the Japanese RPG side, I wonder which came first. I almost certainly would assume it was the anime side here. Here you can see. At some point you get to see the naked back of a female character. And that's probably all you get to see, considering how old the game is. But yeah, I guess maybe it could have been a case where the games came first and then the animes came second, but almost certainly. Alright, you're saying add Apex. I don't have Apex. I don't know which Apex you're even talking about. And when I asked last time, I didn't get a response. There's Mist Valley Apex Avian, which I have 2 of, and then there's Apex Predator. That's in standard, the 2 options. Looking at this card, I have no idea why you would specifically add this card to here, but even if I was going to, I guess I'd get rid of Mirror Force, the bird. Alright, fine. 1 Apex, remove 1 Mirror Force. Is that it as far as changes? Or do we want 2 of them, since I have 2 of them, and do we want to get rid of something like Book of the Moon? I would suggest it's an Omni Negate, so it just negates things. Okay, alright, I'll live with that. There are some cards here though that I think probably I should see if I could summon them a little bit better. Instead of having things that are like tuner and non-tuner monsters, having all link summon monsters I think would be better. Let's see if we can do that easily. Special summon. So something else. Link here. Add penguins, add 2 penguins. Okay. Why did that filter out all the cards? Link summon, I guess maybe it's not special summon. Yeah. Let's see. 1. Let's get rid of all of these. Because I just don't think I'd be able to use that. It's still kind of ridiculous how much polymerization is just not used in these cards. Alright. Beast, Warrior cards. Wing Beast, Wing Beast, Wing Beast. 2. Says take out the level 10 R. Level 10 rare. There's a level 8 rare. Level 8 rare. There is no level 10 rare. Let's see. Yeah, Sniper Ranger saying the extras don't matter that much. Yeah, that's true, but I can potentially make them something of an option if I run out of other options. Or at least that's what I'm thinking. Or I could potentially have something that link summons. I know that there's something here specifically that would let you use the opponent's monsters. But I also might be wrong, and I might be looking at link summon things when I really need XYZ summon things. Level 8 rare. Take one of those out. Alright, well, we got 9 link summons. We'll see if we can do something with that. And then we'll see if we can... Like, the XYZ seems like that would be something that you'd have even less of a chance of pulling off. Let's see. 3 level 9 monsters is probably not realistic. I have more XYZ cards than I realized I did. Level 7, level 10 fiends, 3 level 1 monsters, 2 level 1 monsters, 2 plus level 1s. Yeah, we'll get to the 2 penguins in a second. 4 level 2 monsters, plus 2 level 2 beasts. Level 3, what are these? Level 1s? Level 1s. Ah, actually. So, 2 level 1 monsters. 3 level 1 monsters. 2 plus level 1 monsters. 2 level 1 monsters. 3 level 1 monsters. So we'll play around with some of this. Alright. Yeah. Sniper Ranger here says you've got a lot to dismantle. Laughing smile face, laughing smile face. That would be insane to really do. Like it at that point, if you start dismantling cards, you're losing the crafting points, and your collection is just going to be worse and worse. You gotta think long term. Now, penguins. I guess probably need to reset the filters first. Which penguin are we talking about here? Fluffle penguin? Or glacial bipolar penguin? Flying penguin? Penguin knight? Puny penguin? Flying penguin? Nightmare penguin? Guard penguin? Yep, you're gonna have to get really more specific as far as describing cards. And if it's any of these that I don't have, I'm probably not gonna be interested in crafting it. Let's see. A game called Runia Fairy Tale of the Forgotten Ruins remake has been announced for PC. It's developed by Kodakawa's Chinese subsidiary. Is this a visual novel? Nope. It's a remake of an RPG Maker game. Let's see. One that is in your main deck already. Which penguin's already in the main deck already? Do you mean Flo Andres and Emperor? Okay, I assume that's what you mean. Alright, fine. Made changes. Here, which cards do I not own? This one. Let's see if we can add any cards quickly. Alright, so I guess your easiest bet solution here would be to do this and then just generate that card. Since that was just 30. And that's the easiest way to solve that problem. I think at this point the deck is done, so I'm not particularly interested in making any more changes. Because we're in this. I've spent a lot of time, certainly now, trying to build a new deck. Spent a lot of crafting points. Don't have any extra left. I'm pot committed, to use a poker term, as far as that deck. On top of which, the XYZ Synchro Festival is coming up, so this new deck is barely even going to get played for 3 days, and then I'm not going to probably play it at all for potentially 15 days. And fingers crossed the meta doesn't change, or it changes in a way in which that deck plays better. Meanwhile, we have a ton of Gamatsu news still. Sable coming to the PS5 we'd already talked about. Power Wash Simulator is coming soon to the PS5, PS4, and Switch. Which seems to me like every time I see Power Wash Simulator, it is got something new about it. The idea of power washing an old carnival definitely looks new, and most of this heads-up display looks new compared to what I had seen before. Maybe I'm thinking of a completely different power wash simulating game. The game Oni, Road to the Mightiest Oni, Oni being the Japanese word for demon, has an opening movie. I could show the opening movie, but I can tell you in this one thumbnail that it is going to look fairly different from what I've seen of the game up until this point. So the opening movie is really just going to be an advertisement and a distraction. Wulong Fallen Dynasty has a Tokyo Game Show 2022 interview video if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. This Wulong Fallen Dynasty might be a major player in a Japanese or Chinese style game that actually potentially sells in the West. Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle Special Edition is coming to the Xbox Series and the Xbox One in spring of 2023. This is a flatter 2D fighting game, although you can see there is still a lot of flashiness, a lot of blinding lights, which at a certain point, maybe for a newbie to the fighting series, I need to find a game that just has people punching people without doing all the flashing and all the effects. Guilty Gear Strive is coming to the Xbox Series and Xbox One in spring of 2023. This is the second game that I've seen that I've called or noticed or being announced at the Tokyo Game Show coming to the Xbox or Xbox One, Xbox Series or Xbox One, which may be a reoccurring theme is that we see more and more Japanese games particularly announced at the Tokyo Game Show coming to the Xbox, because Xbox is finally starting to get some fandom in Japan. Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch Remastered, also coming to the Xbox, and Revenant Kingdom is coming in 2023, which is the sequel. I don't recommend Ni no Kuni, but coming to Xbox is interesting. Danganronpa Volume 3 Killing Harmony Anniversary Edition is now available for the Xbox One and PC, which at some point I need to buy Danganronpa 2 and play that. At least one person I know was fairly excited in me covering it, and I am somewhat excited in going all the way through the Danganronpa series, even kind of knowing that there's probably not going to be a Danganronpa 4. Instead, there's probably will just be a spiritual successors to the Danganronpa series. Overwatch 2 reveals a new playable hero called Kiriko, which looks fairly Japanese, although also generally just looks weird. I'm trying to figure out what this is. Is this some kind of tissue dispenser or mask dispenser? Or some kind of ejection parachute thing? You might even go more Chinese than Japanese in the style of her outfit. Yeah, she seems like she's some kind of Shrine Maiden type character, summoning spirits. Yeah. I really have to question, though, how much of Overwatch 2 is even going to succeed, just because I don't know how many people are really still playing Overwatch 1 or are interested in the major shift to free-to-play and playing Overwatch 2. her throwing kunai daggers and talismans isn't too different from just shooting guns. Up until this point, let me see if we can pause this and rewind this a little bit. Up until this point, they have been fairly heavy on showing off the new characters in Overwatch 2, of really not showing a lot of skin and having a lot of heavy armor over the bust and of female characters. They're really not trying to emphasize them to the point where they're de-emphasizing what would be natural feminine qualities. And even in this one, it's not terrible. They've done a lot less of that, but you have here a red undershirt and then an overshirt, and then you have this Shrine Maiden fold that is fairly high up, just again puffing out really quite a bit. Looking at her, it gives off more of a feeling that she has perhaps a really wide hip, but it is just a lot of layers of clothing. But yeah, like that character that just ran by, she has a huge amount of armor over herself. In general, I think there's probably just a bad character designs on most of the Overwatch characters. But they are desperate to not make another character like Tracer that's in a skin-tight suit and that is being overly adored and sexualized to some extent in fan art. They're fighting against Rule 34 far too hard. Let's see, let's get some background music here. Might even get lucky and get another Duel live. Which, if anything, they should have totally doubled down, tripled down on Tracer as a character, and the love for Tracer originally that was there. Noticeably, also, there was Disney levels of animations in the teasers and trailers that were shown off for the original Overwatch. Like it was so good. Frankly, it probably would have been more interesting to watch a Overwatch movie made by somebody like Disney than it was to actually play the first Overwatch game. We have not seen really any trailers like that so far for Overwatch 2. Probably because it blew the budget, but yeah, they set a standard and now they're lowering that standard. Moving on, Gamatsu says Pal World adds an Xbox Series and Xbox One version. This is what looks to be a Pokemon with guns game. Let's check out that Steam page. Yeah. It definitely feels very much like they straight up are ripping off a visual style of Pokemon, which you kind of have to. Either you make Pokemons. Yeah, it is Pokemon with guns. Like you kind of have to rip off the Pokemon style, because the Pokemon style is basically the only every kind of style merged together. And they're fictional characters, so ripping off one fictional animated character versus another doesn't really upset me much. That's an interesting idea, having Pokemon like characters as sled dogs. Seems like this game is promising quite a bit as far as different ways you attack and fight. Guns, bows and arrows, lots of characters. This is oddly labeled as single player with online co-op. You run into another problem certainly here. There's a lot of promise, not a lot of guarantee that it will actually ever happen. But you run into another problem because they've added auto battles to the most recent Pokemon game. So now, for the first time in the series, there is a theory that you could collect them all, like all 400, 600, however many Pokemon you can actually get, and bring them or import them into the newest games, and then have them auto battle, and you might be able to level them up to a max level, which that would be a major progression as far as the power curves of potential Pokemon from moving from one game to another. Although it may not matter that much because Pokemon still have some random stats hidden inside of them, so one Pikachu is not the same as another Pikachu. Moving on, Deathloop is coming to Xbox Series on September 20th alongside a Golden Loop update, which I doubt any update to Deathloop would significantly improve the game. Demon Gaze Extra physical editions for the PS4 and Switch launches January 13th in 2023. I don't feel like I've heard of a game called Demon Gaze. This definitely feels like this is just two anime kids being burnt to death, which even for anime that seems pretty extreme. It's a turn-based RPG. And yeah, the entire depiction in the trailer looks completely different than that thumbnail. Completely different art style. Completely different characters. Feels like it's a pretty mature game, which might catch my attention, but then why go with that thumbnail? That seems like a real mistake. I guess maybe the idea is that each of these characters have a demon gaze mode. But yeah, it overall does just kind of look like it's a dungeon crawler. But yeah, this is a terrible thumbnail for what that game was. Talk about just missing your audience. Maybe it makes more sense if you actually play the game, but trailers should make sense if you haven't played the game. SD Gundam Battle Alliance DLC Season Pass trailer is available if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Star Ocean The Divine Force demo launches September 20th. They also have the Tokyo Game Show trailer and more information if you want to check that out. Lego Brick Tales launches October 12th. And yeah, I have a lot of hope, certainly, that Lego Brick Tales is good. There is a lot of different types of gameplay that is promising compared to the TT games, and most recently the remake of the Lego Star Wars collection. Seems like you're actually building Lego. Yep. I've been particularly out of the loop as far as buying Lego lately, and I'm fairly happy with that. Like I have a pretty big backlog and a lot of other stuff I'm working on, so more Lego video games might even work as a way of stopping me from wasting money on the actual plastic bricks. This looks interesting, certainly. I don't know if I'd go out of my way to buy it brand new day one. Also, I'd want to see if the new makers of new Lego games, since it's not TT Games, it's not the same publisher or developers, see if they're going to try and fill it with a bunch of microtransactions, because as a kid's game it really should be a one and done purchase. The single player horror adventure game Saturnalia launches October 27th for the PS5 and PS4 and the Xbox Series M1 and the Switch and PC. It's set in an Italian region of Sardinia, circa 1989. That is definitely a different art style. What is it? What does the trailer show me? It's a horror game. I would kind of assume it's like a horror adventure game. Yeah, it's like a pencil sketch art style. You have to be careful with certainly trailers like this, because on one end you might have an artist who has an actual art style they're trying to get across, and it's important to the way they're telling their story or showing their art. On the other hand, this may just be a bad artist who is bad and is trying to hide the fact that they're bad. I could imagine that these could have started off as just 3D models, and then they threw a bad visual filter over it to give that pencil art style, and it doesn't really connect to the story or make sense. And like almost all horror games, you have to be fairly cautious. There's just so many of them that come out on Steam. Famitsu sales have been updated. Let's see, Splatoon 3's over 1 million and nearly at 2 million now in its sales. Alice Gear Aegis is doing a decent job at maintaining the 9th position, considering how bad the game looks, and if you add the PS4 version, it's doing even better. NBA 2K23 doing pretty poorly. Steel Rising doing really poorly. Adventure Academia doing pretty awful. If you're not making it in the top 30 for a week's worth of sales in Japan, you're doing pretty awful in Japan. Hardware wise, we're still seeing the Switch dominate, and the PlayStation still seems to be fairly in stock, but we're also getting the occasional bump in sales with the Xbox. Although notably for this week, the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition has beaten out the Xbox Series X and S, which implies that the Digital Edition is now more in stock also. And then you might as well not mention the PlayStation 4 or the new 2DS, because there's basically no sales going on there at all. A game called One Piece Odyssey launches January 13th. We had already seen some trailers and announcements for this One Piece game. I definitely have to question whether I could ever actually get into any One Piece game, just knowing how long the One Piece manga and anime are. Even if it is its own standalone story, I can't help but assume that you really need some level of familiarity with the main characters, and I just don't have that. Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak expansion title update 2 launches September 29th, so more Monster Hunter Rise updates. I still feel like I'd go and play Monster Hunter World before I played Monster Hunter Rise. And I guess if they just never come out with a game that's at that same level of quality as Monster Hunter World, then you kind of have to assume that that was just a fluke, and the games are going to still be good probably, but not as good as Monster Hunter World was, and not as well received as Monster Hunter World. Resident Evil Village gets DLC Winters expansion and a Tokyo 2022 trailer and screenshots. I didn't really assume that there would be more Village expansions or DLCs. It'll be interesting certainly to see if you're going through the game as a different character, which almost certainly you are, or if you're continuing the story, because the DLC for Resident Evil 7 in particular kind of sort of connected to the main story, but stood apart as its own things. And honestly, I think unless I'm mistaken, this girl is a main character from Resident Evil 7, and so if she's now going to be a reoccurring character, that would be interesting. Let's see. The Resident Evil 4 remake adds a PS4 version, and Resident Evil Showcase is set for October. But they're not really showing much of anything. But you can certainly take something from even this image, because I really don't recognize this. This feels like this is in a house somewhere, probably early in the game of Resident Evil 4, but there was never a shack or a house that was this intricately designed and full of items. And yeah, that will feel different certainly if all of a sudden the village at the very beginning of Resident Evil 4 is twice as big, or the people are the amount of buildings or the size of the town is just twice as big. I almost wouldn't complain about that action sequence at the very beginning of the game where you first see the guy with the chainsaw. If that was almost an entire act where you were being chased and then you managed to escape from him for a while and then you start getting chased again. You spend a lot of time being chased anyways in Resident Evil 4, but that was a very memorable sequence that doesn't actually last that long because it is a timed event. So I could see potentially trying to do that in a different way. Although, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see how different this Resident Evil 4 remake is. And even if they succeed amazingly well with the Resident Evil 4 remake, what do they do with 5 and 6? Like, almost certainly Resident Evil 5 doesn't even take place in Africa. And that whole storyline gets forgotten. And there was barely much of a storyline in Resident Evil 6 at all. Sniper Ranger says Exoprimal looks cool. Yeah. Exoprimal has a story trailer and screenshots. Which, alright. Seems like you are going to see more faces and people in this game and not just people in mech suits. Which that is probably a smart move. Seems like you can even customize your characters. Exoprimal is the dinosaurs from another dimension or another timeline fighting game. Yeah, now I remember. I guess that makes a lot of sense. They're being fairly quick about putting out a lot of advertisement for this game, so I would expect that Exoprimal is coming in early 2023 and not late 2023. Even though they don't really have a release date. And arguably I'm making a mistake putting so many of these games on the fall list when they don't have release dates, but it's not really a big deal either way. Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection adds 3D Mega Man.exe title screen and online battles and chip trading. Sniper Ranger had asked me earlier if you wanted to duel, and yeah, I'm just not dueling anybody. It's not worth it. I'm already behind on the news. I'm done dueling for today, period. But like, I'm at the danger certainly with Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Master being the 4th or 5th collectible card game I've played on my channel, where I'm really saturated on playing collectible card games anyways. So anything that gets me more bored or upset with Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Master, which includes trying to friend people and play them online with their bad system at the moment, is not going to be a good thing in the long run. Like, in the long run, I need to maintain a level of interest in Duel Masters and focus on trying to get up ranked and getting rewards and getting cards, so that I potentially have extra cards to potentially have extra crafting points. The second they came out with rewards and said every time you friend battled somebody you got a certain random reward of anything, then it would be a different situation. Or if we got daily quests to play friends, it would be a different situation. Yeah, Mega Man Battle Network. I don't know if there's really a lot they're showing off here. Seems like just a whole bunch of different poses of Mega Man in the menus. This game is coming, the Legacy Collection is coming to the PS4, Switch, and PC via Steam in 2023. Notably, not the PS5 or the Xbox Series, so maybe it's already out on those services. Street Fighter 6 adds Kin, Blanka, Dualism, and E Honda, which, yeah, they show each of those characters. So obviously they're adding each of those characters, although each of these characters look way too big in my opinion. Uncharted Lost Legacy of Thieves Collection, launching October 19th. We already talked about that. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer and Warzone 2 revealed. Sega Genesis extra games revealed. Hako Niwa Boku Jo Hitsuji Mura gameplay trailer is available. This looks like another farming simulator game for the Switch in particular. Almost certainly this was announced at the Nintendo Direct under a different name. Yeah. These slice of life run a farm games. This one feels a little bit older. I have wondered if it is a Japanese conspiracy of old game developers to make more farming simulator games in Japan to try to get the youth of Japan to get back into farming. I don't know how many like major farming productions actually happen in Japan. I don't know how many farmers in Japan actually have tractors or things like that or even need them. It may very well be that they are still just planting rice by hand as was done 400 years ago. But yeah, I can't... I guess I could see the Japanese youth, though, seeing the hustle and bustle of living in Tokyo, where most of the Japanese do live, and then fantasizing about living in the country. Although most of the Japanese country is just not really accommodating to the next current generations or the youth generation of Japan. Sniper Ranger said a while ago that the Mega Man game looks like it's for old-time fans, not my cup of tea. Well, Battle Network actually isn't that old, because there's, I think, about 6 to 12 Mega Man games before the Battle Network games came out. But yeah, they did come out around the Nintendo 2DS era, and they're getting resold. Let's see, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion has 30 minutes of gameplay if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Suikoden 1 and 2 HD remasters we already talked about, so we can skip that. The Taito Rail Shooter Revival Operation Wolf returns. First mission has been announced for the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox One and Series and the Switch and PC and the Oculus Quest 2. So it's just almost everything you could think of. An on-rail shooter. I always want to see on-rail shooters succeed. I'm not sure if any of them ever would. This one doesn't look amazingly good as far as the screenshots. It looks a little low polygony and perhaps even a little bit asset flippy for what it is. At a certain level, I guess you could get away with a lot of asset flipping in an on-rail shooter. The enemies just don't stand out as looking particularly good. I don't know if on-rail shooters in general, though, have evolved well enough. There's a lot of genres of games that people just didn't invest enough development time in to think of new ways to do it, which makes weird statements like the best on-rail shooter is probably Pokemon Snap, because Pokemon Snap lets you shoot things without actually shooting things. You're shooting them with a camera. You can speed up and slow down. You can change your paths. You have a whole Pokedex aspect, and the new Pokemon Snap game in particular for the Switch is really nice with some quality of life improvements as far as showing you on the map where you've seen or taken pictures of creatures. Moving on. EU Den Chronicle 100 Heroes has a Tokyo Game Show trailer. This is another, I almost assume, Square Enix RPG game. Nope, actually it's from Rabbit and Bear Studios, being published by 505 Games. But at the look of it, it doesn't catch my attention, and I'm trying to rush here. EU Den Chronicles Rising Physical Edition for the PS5, PS4, and Switch launches January 26th. Apparently they have a kangaroo character. Dragon Ball The Breakers, Majin Buu, and Farmer reveal trailer. Who is Farmer? Well, if I vaguely recall, maybe Majin Buu ran into a farmer in Dragon Ball Z. I don't even really know, though, if the... yeah, that's basically it. Is that they ran into a farmer character. I don't know if The Breakers is living the story of Dragon Ball Z, or if this is more going back in time and telling it with slight alterations. I think it might be going back in time. Interesting. It seems like there's perhaps a farming minigame in this, and that this game isn't just straight up fighting. Yeah. So I guess I have no idea what Dragon Ball The Breakers is about. Sniper Ranger says more RPG games woo, or 90% of RPG games, gacha games. Nope. And then he says no, that was Raditz and DBZ. Okay. I don't think so. I would really have to question whether 90% of all RPG games are gacha, depending on what you define gacha as. 90% of all RPG games, I don't think, are even collectible games where you have Pokemon style creatures or creature collections or items of specific importance that you collect. What I would define gacha definitely as, though, is more of a game where it is very much open to buying loot boxes and getting characters through things like loot boxes and trying to collect those characters. And I would say no, almost certainly most RPG games do not have loot boxes that you open to get collectibles. And even at that, when you look at something like Borderlands, where you have potential golden keys, and I don't think there is even a specific Borderlands game where you can spend real world money to get more golden keys, but even if you could do that, the guns you're getting in something like Borderlands are pretty much randomly generated, and I wouldn't really call that so much gacha even then. Gacha tends to have actual characters um, that are very unique and highlighted, and that you would want to catch them all, not randomly generated characters or characters with random stats. Uh, Sometimes Gacha has like special versions of characters, so you might have a standard and a foil and then a golden version of a character, but after getting the golden version, you would have the same golden version as anyone else. Let's see. Sniper Ranger says Dragon Ball Breakers is a Dead by Daylight spin-off in certain aspects. I don't know if he's joking there or what certain aspects he means. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series in 2023, and Season 2 Pass has been announced. Seems like there might be slight improvements in what can be rendered, although at a certain level, I don't know if it's really that much of an improvement as much as it is just a change. So often that's what happens, is you just see people go, alright, well in this game it's all green grass, this time let's put some flowers and make it look different. Although when you look at the fuzziness of the textures of the walls in the background, you can see it's definitely sharper here, and this farmhouse, I assume is what that is, looks better. There's also rocks here where there are no rocks here, and more trees here, or at least seems like there's more foliage in the trees. So that does feel like real improvement. Of course, part of the problem here is companies like Bandai Namco, I believe that's who owns the rights to Dragon Ball, are going really crazy and trying to put out two or three of the exact same genre series of games. You would think it would make a lot more sense for there to be just one Dragon Ball Z game out at a time. Let's see. The Wulong Fallen Dynasty demo for PS5 and Xbox Series is now available until September 26th. We already talked about that. Atelier Ryza 3 Alchemist of the End and the Secret Key has a trailer for one of the characters called Boss Brunin, or Bose Brunin. This is not a character I recognize, though, so I assume he's probably a new character. Of course, I haven't played any of the Atelier Ryza series, so it would be kind of crazy to get in the extra details about the third game in the series. Romancing Saga Minstrel Song Remastered has a game overview and characters trailer. This looks like a remaster of a older game. I would venture to describe this animation style as chibi, but it really isn't the chibi art style quite. It would, for lack of a better term, I would say dwarf style. It makes all the characters look like they suffer from dwarfism. Just because you have some odd proportions, just like really big heads. Almost gets dangerously close to being a Funko Pop style if you were going to make something that was halfway towards a Funko Pop style. It's almost like when they remaster some of these games, they're intentionally making the characters shorter and smaller so they use less polygons. But by using less polygons, you have her arms awkwardly bent, like her arms are broken, even in this hand-selected screenshot. Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher Daily Life of a Kaiju Breeder has a trailer, which shockingly we seem to be getting quite a few kaiju games too. I'm assuming, looking at this, that this is a half Monster Rancher game, half kaiju game, which almost certainly would have to be a huge fan of both the kaiju movies and characters and Monster Rancher to even begin to think about playing that game. A Genshin Impact anime project with Ufotable has been announced, which Ufotable, I'm not sure, is an animation company that I recognize. And in a funny way, handing over the animation of Genshin Impact to somebody else seems like a mistake, because the one thing that makes Genshin Impact stand out and look interesting is its art style. So if you give it to a different company, it could come off pretty badly. Also, there's a danger in taking a game narrative like Genshin Impact and trying to squeeze that into an anime TV series or an anime movie. One way or the other, the story might be too complex for a movie or TV series, or it might be too shallow for a TV or a series, because of the fact that you probably aren't really going to have the same kind of absorption rate of narrative in a video game, particularly a game like Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact is very notably a gacha game because of the characters that you can get out of loot boxes. What's interesting about this, I would say, is I've been paying a little bit of attention, not a lot, just the tiniest amount of attention to Genshin Impact, and I don't recognize any of the characters I'm seeing on this trailer at all. So either these are new characters or these are just not characters that caught my attention. And yeah, that teaser trailer is not really showing a lot other than a big open world. Alright, and then our last Gematsu article for today says Genshin Impact version 3.1 update King Deseret and the Three Magi. And then you can see there's a whole bunch of characters. I'm not sure any of them are from the animation project though. The game itself here looks more intriguing. So it's a very Egyptian themed expansion. You very well might cannibalize your audience. Alright, let's go through the games that came out on Steam. Just go through a whole bunch of stuff. Photogenic Minds Identity. There might be something to this. Is this English supported? No. It says it's a card game roguelike. It doesn't look like anything like a card game or roguelike Japanese game. I would love to see how this game actually is going to play as a solitaire roguelike card game. But I have to assume that really that is just tag cramming, which Valve probably needs to do a better job about that. Yeah, there's nothing here that says this should be tagged as roguelike or solitaire. If anything, what Valve should do is make the players, make the creators of the game actively pick a lot of game tags that it is not. To just say there absolutely are no puzzles in this game. This is not an RPG Maker game. This is not a solitaire game. If they even made them say, for every tag you do use on this game, you have to pick a tag that you don't use, that would be perhaps a balancing factor, although that really just turns it into a bit of a game. Endless Nightmare here. Is this going to be in English? Yes, it says English and full audio. Overall, it probably is either a Portuguese or a Chinese game, looking at the art style. Might be something to that. And again, I guess I'm lowering my standards. If there's a release date here or a release date here, I'll put it on the follow list. Electro doesn't look like anything. Yeah, I can see the beginning of the end, so we don't have a ton of games. I did make some. This one says coming soon in TBA, so I'm not going to put it on the follow list. I did make some YouTube shorts and make some room, and I need to just be better about doing that. Dino Life. I don't think I can agree with a game that has the dinosaurs just brightly colored and low polygon like that. Yet another farming sim game according to the tags. AWOL. I feel like I'd seen this game a long time ago. But maybe not. It's not on the follow list. It's oddly a free-to-play game with no in-app purchases. So even if it was a good game, as a video game critic, all I can really say is check it out now. It's free. You only waste your time. Overall, visually, though, I don't think I'd even suggest it that far. There's a fairly big difference from being AWOL and then being an active person who's shooting at people. Oops, this one's an adult game, come to think of it. Like actively shooting people you're not authorized to shoot because you're AWOL off mission, or actively shooting people that are trying to arrest you for going AWOL. At a certain point, you've just turned terrorist at that point. So we have this adult game that I shouldn't show you called Chris and the City of Pleasure, which is an RPG Maker game. Elf girls, big boobs, skin being shown. Doesn't look terrible in the CGs, but they are actively putting the CG good cutscenes in front of some really ugly looking screenshots of just 8-bit RPG Maker type gameplay. So you're not getting a single screenshot that doesn't have something over it hiding what the actual game is. It's $17.99 English, Japanese, and Chinese. This is definitely a game I would classify. Chris and the City of Pleasure is a game I'd classify as a Eastern game that I definitely would have missed had I not been looking at the adults only section on Steam as far as new games. So that is one more data point, certainly, to try and figure out what the balance is. Notably so far, though, for Tokyo Game Show, I have not seen any real announcements of any kind of adult content games from Tokyo Game Show, or even around the time of Tokyo Game Show. We may start to see more of this. This indoor kickball, I don't think it's quite good enough as an idea. What would make indoor kickball succeed, I guess, is a question. Hololive error here. I think I would say no to, because it's just got a lot of dark screenshot syndrome happening here. It doesn't feel like there's an actual game worth of visuals to show. Yeah. It is rated very positively, though, so I guess I'll let some mob rule convince me to put that on the follow list. But as a horror game, also, I don't think I'd put that on a YouTube short. This looks like garbage. Trombone Champ. Looks like it's a joke troll game. Unichrome, 1-bit unicorn adventure. This is one of those things where this could be a joke game that's actually a game and is fun to play, or this could be a joke game that is just absolute garbage. And that's why we have the follow list, certainly, is to put things like that on the follow list and see how people respond. Is this an adult game? Game, strong language and sexual language, it says. That's all it has. That being said, it's in the adults only section, which that's just the weirdness that we keep running into, is that things seem to be getting put in the adults only section, and then they seem to claim to not actually have an adults only content in it. Although it definitely feels like in this game, which supports English, Japanese, and Chinese, that there is at least some implications of perhaps sexual assault, but then behind it seems to be just your standard generic RPG elements, and yeah, not anything particularly interesting. I don't even know the names of this. The Claws of Blood, I guess, is what it translates to, but it's all written in Chinese or Japanese. Moving on. Yeah, I guess we're going to push the question as far as whether the newly written rules of adult content on YouTube get enforced differently. Magic Carnage here doesn't look like anything. And we have a hidden object game, it claims, but actually it looks more like an asset flip survival game. High Eggplant looks like it doesn't support English. Just a simplistic Chinese game of some sort. We really haven't. We've been filtering out Chinese games, so I haven't really seen a lot of low effort garbage Chinese games. Next we have another adult game, and it's called 69UYUUKO Hot, and it seems to be one kinda anime-esque character lady, and then kind of feels like it's just a clicker game where there are gems that pop up and you just have to click on the gems as fast as possible to proceed the imagery towards fewer articles of clothing being worn. In this instance, it's an English and Russian game, and that would explain the slightly anime style to it, but not really. Dimensional Gears doesn't look like anything. I don't know how to really address the fact that almost any adult game is probably going to have something more to say about it compared to a low effort asset flip game. If you show me a jigsaw puzzle game or a hidden object game, I'm gonna have almost nothing to say on it. This might be good. I'm gonna give it a chance. But yeah, just in the fact that the adult games tend to be weirder, and in the fact that I'm not able to actually show them as much. So that they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I'm definitely leaning on that idea where I click on one of these. I'm not even showing the games at the moment, am I? Wonder how many times I've done that. But yeah, I'm definitely leaning on just clicking through the screenshots a lot of times and letting people just kind of see the game and see how awful it is, and just hoping generally that people are in agreement to a certain level of my assessment of games. I'll give that one a follow. Bird. What's interesting about this, even though it's not a game that deserves a follow, is that at the very least we've seen so many games where you play as a bird and fly around, but we haven't been able to play as one that is actually bright and colorful and more like a toucan. We almost always see the bird as either a white bird or a brown bird or kind of an electric low polygon bird. Getting a little bit more color is nice. The rest of this game, though, of course, does not look good. And we have a game called Ninja Soul, which looks like it's a ninja platforming game of some sort. English, Japanese, Chinese, and Korean. Might be a Chinese game. Yep. There could be something here. Or it could be kind of nothing. So that's when we put on the follow list. Although I guess I'm not picking a lot of things to make YouTube shorts on, so I'll pick that as something that should be on the YouTube short. Then we have a game here called Plan B Goddess Cards, which is showing some cleavage but not really showing anything else. Notably, this game doesn't seem to claim any adult content at all, and yet almost certainly there is some kind of patch for this. You don't have characters in bikinis and a simplistic match the cards style gameplay. Also notably, I've just realized this character here that's being shown in the card art is from Destiny Child, my favorite lewd waifu collectathon game. So this art is stolen. I can guarantee you it's stolen because Shift Up would have some involvement otherwise. Plus, I don't recognize this character or this character. Even not recognizing this from Destiny Child, though, you can see that there's a fairly different style of animation going on there. Very inconsistent. So, how do you report a game? Let's see, click here. No. Flag. Report this product. Fraud. Let's see. Legal violation. Let's see. Contains stolen art from Shift Up's game Destiny Child. Never know where to put the apostrophe on the S when you do that. Alright, we'll flag it and we'll see what happens there. And interesting, I'll put it on the follow list also. So yeah, never flagged anything before, but yeah, we'll flag it and we'll see what happens. See if I get a follow-up email or anything like that. Let's see. Moving on, we have a game here called Karma Collector, which looks like not quite polished enough to really be for sale fighting game. fighting game that seems to oddly also have a few visual novel aspects, which that's, I guess, not that weird. And it's Japanese only. We're not really seeing a lot of Japanese only games for the Tokyo Game Show, but also like PC gaming still not really that big in Japan, and games potentially being released the day of the Tokyo Game Show doesn't really make a lot of sense. Japanese love to announce games a year to well, I'd say a year to longer before a game actually comes out. I have no idea what this is supposed to be. I'm assuming that this is kind of an adventure match game. That's what it looks like. Find the hidden object type thing. Some kind of find the hidden object Chinese game. I'm gonna say no to it. And we have yet another adult game. The number of anime games that are showing up under the adult game category today is fairly high, though. So this game, Yes My Lord, is tagged as adult. Says there is some nudity, but the vast majority of the game does seem to be just an RPG Maker game. But I don't know if that has more to do with the Tokyo Game Show, or if maybe my sample size has just been different. So I'll be interested in seeing how many Japanese animation style adult games we start seeing in a week or two, which inherently I am just committing to looking at adult games, which makes for an awkward process of going through all these games, whereas otherwise I could have just safely scrolled through all of these without having to pop the screen away. But if I'm committing to looking at almost every single game that comes out on Steam, which is what I'm looking at, like there really aren't any exceptions at all, so I am looking at every game that comes out on Steam, I should just commit to that. This is weird. Painting metal like this, I just don't think you would do that to metal unless you're sandblasting the metal, and even at that I don't think that's the way you would restore or maintain these kinds of artifacts. That seems weird, and it doesn't really seem like a game. It's also a prologue, so I can dismiss it immediately. Amazing Chicken Adventures might be something, so I'll give it a follow. Foot pool, half soccer, half pool. Yeah, there might be something to that. Probably not much. The Grizzled American Digital, some kind of card game. Looks interesting. Yep. What is probably going to happen is I'm going to boil down into putting a lot of things, having a lot of tabs open for the YouTube Shorts, and then when I start doing the YouTube Shorts, starting filtering it a lot more by whether it actually has a release date. We have a game here called Lo-Fi Waifu Jigsaw, which the lo-fi part of that seems to be kind of non-existent, really. It is just pictures of animated girls in nude positions, being naked. Says there's a lo-fi soundtrack. It's English only. Looks to have a decent collection of jigsaw puzzles, but not something that I would even recommend for the $2.54 it's selling for. And its animation style definitely puts it more into the Western style of games. It's also English only, so that's more of a Western adult game. Then the next one we have is another adult game called Love Lust Project Stockholm, which looks like an RPG Maker game that is just animated awful. It's really, really bad animation, the kind of things that you would expect to see by as some kind of like ad or free comic on some porn site or something. Like, it's not good. Oddly though, this game is selling for $14.99 and is English only, and it is mostly showing cutscenes and RPG Maker stuff. It's not definitely terrible art style. And Ash battle here doesn't look like anything. I've seen a lot of adult games in general though, both Eastern and Western, and this probably is the first time ever where I felt like the percentages felt accurate, in that we're seeing slightly more Eastern games being released compared to Western games. We're still not really seeing anything that that screams any anime characters in school outfits, so that fetish still seems to be a no-go zone for Valve, and it almost certainly will be a no-go zone forever. But yeah, it definitely seems to be more of a leaning. And just a lot more adult games in general. Next game we have here is called Cyber FUCK 2069, and this is the first one that is more of the 3D model characters, which I'd been seeing a lot of games like that where it's very much just 3D models of women. Maybe the characters in this case are a little bit more brightly colored than a real human would look. There seems to be a completely different game attached to it where you run and gun with a completely different character, but the vast majority of these screenshots and the trailer are literally just showing two characters making love. And I still am of the opinion that these screenshots for the game should be censored, because it is fairly jarring to just go to a new tab and immediately have boobs thrown in your face. Let's see. We have a game here called Plunder Panic, which I assume is a player versus player game. How is this already in my library? That doesn't make any sense. I have no idea how this game is on my library. I can only assume that it was a free game at some point, and I've never played it. Yeah, it was $0. Now it is $20. Seems to be mostly focused around player versus player games, so I probably will never play it anyways. There was a study that I saw got put out on Reddit, one of the r/science type forums on Reddit, talking about how pornography was shown to be used to alleviate boredom in a form of escapism. Yeah, I could certainly see that. It would certainly explain, though, it would explain why there would be some parallels between playing video games and looking at porn. Same type of bored person, escaping a boring life, escaping a boring circumstance. It doesn't particularly explain why there isn't more video game porn at that rate, because you'd think that there would be. Although inherently it's easier to make porn than it is to make a video game. This Garbanzo quest is probably nothing. It definitely feels like a Super Mario World clone. That doesn't inherently mean it's bad though. Also, so I'll give it a chance, put it on the follow list. Let's see. And then we have some GameDeveloper.com articles. GoldenEye has Nintendo Switch GoldenEye 007 has exclusive online multiplayer. There was an interesting speculation as to perhaps the multiplayer just showing all 4 players on the screen to all players. That would be an interesting way, certainly for old games that had only local split screen multiplayer. That would be an interesting way to not have to reprogram it and give multiplayer, port over multiplayer to an online version. Although at a certain level, if you can show 4 quadrants of the screen to 4 different players, then you probably aren't that far from being able to crop out each quadrant and show only that specific player's quadrant to each player. And you really are only a couple more lines of code potentially away from just saying, alright, render each of those quadrants to each of those different players at a high resolution. So yeah, 20 lines of code potentially, if you know how your game ran the first time. It really wouldn't be that hard to make an online multiplayer if you already have split screen local multiplayer. Reggie Fils-Aimé says unions happen when core needs of a worker aren't being fulfilled, which is not something I can particularly disagree with, although almost certainly anti-union Nintendo is, and particularly anti-union Nintendo of America, is going to color anything Reggie Fils-Aimé has to say. I think he was probably pretty anti-union as a CEO, even before he was the president of Nintendo of America, because he ran other companies. But yeah, that is a fairly generic statement to quote somebody as. Inherently, the problem with Reggie Fils-Aimé at this point, though, is that he just needs to go away. I can't help but feel like he's just pushing to be put back in charge of Nintendo of America, because he keeps getting these interviews and keeps getting quoted where Doug Bowser, the current CEO of Nintendo of America, is being held quiet, probably by Nintendo of Japan. Nintendo of Japan is probably pretty anti-union too, but they can't do anything about it because unions are just an actual thing with actual strength in Japan, and there's no getting around it. But yeah, he's not wrong. If a company does a good job and serves all the needs and most of the desires of employees, they won't go through the hassle and the struggle of fighting against a company to start a union. If a company has a union, at some point that company was bad and treated its employees badly. And very often unions don't 100% fix that situation after the fact. But on the other hand, name one video game company that is actually treating its employees correctly. Like, there really isn't that many, or I don't think there's even one that isn't building around a attitude of crunch being acceptable, an attitude of firing people after projects are done, not crediting people when they leave a job, not really giving benefits or long-time retirements. Typically also, when unions aren't involved in a higher skilled job, you see employees getting paid quite a lot, but then having no time off and just no life whatsoever. And they get paid a lot up front, but they tend not to have pensions or benefits. Video game developers in particular desperately need pensions. there's going to be a whole generation of game developers that are hopefully saving up for their own retirement. Otherwise, they're going to have nothing left. Moving on, though, we already talked about the in-depth probe by the UK regulators for the Activision Blizzard deal. Blizzard explains Overwatch 2's Battle Pass and in-game shop if you want to check that out. Here's another character that I guess is not covering up the just as much. In fact, this character is showing quite a decent amount of skin compared to, say, this character or this character. If anything, it may be more of a issue of them just trying to put battle armor on everything and turning Overwatch 2 into basically like a cartoon where just every character has battle armor that can be sold as action figures, which I don't think they actually do sell Overwatch action figures. A developer called Ruckus Games has been formed apparently from ex-Gearbox and Riot developers, and they've received $5.5 million in funding. This was formed in 2021, which potentially this might be half, if not more than half, of all the good Gearbox employees. That might very well explain Borderlands the pre-sequel and Borderlands 3 not really being that as good. They're working on an unannounced debut title, which I assume this is probably a screenshot from Borderlands and the Tiny Tina's, which is probably not appropriate for GameDeveloper.com to use a screenshot from Tiny Tina's adventures to talk about Ruckus Games, when Ruckus Games had no involvement in Tiny Tina's adventure. In a lot of ways, though, this is definitely an announcement for an announcement for an announcement for an announcement. And $5 million in funding is maybe enough, but maybe not enough, depending on what they're going to make. And you almost don't want to see, I don't know if I particularly want to see ex-Gearbox developers and ex-Riot developers just try to make a Borderlands competitor. Interestingly, it's worth pointing out that 2K owns Borderlands, so they could at any point decide to take the Borderlands series away from Gearbox and hand it over to Ruckus Games if they wanted to. But you'd almost want to see them do something different and something better. One of the best things about Borderlands was innovative randomization of loot and guns and funny, interesting characters. Just trying to copy that directly probably isn't enough. You need to have better characters and more entertaining characters in one way or another, and something more than just random bazillions of guns generators. My throat is running pretty dry here. We've been talking quite a while. Mythical Games has Blanco's Block Party becomes the Epic Games Store's first Web3 game, which Web3, I guess in this case, probably means it has NFTs in it. Not that it is using a new HTML programming or anything like that. Players can own playable NFTs, called Blancos. Which Blanco, I think, is just an insult. Maybe it's spelled a different way in Spanish, but I think Blanco is just an insult for white people in Spanish. And then if you have a lot of characters here that look like they could be from the Dias de la Muertes festival, that stands out somewhat too. Yeah. I kind of feel like there's no way that Web3 should ever mean NFTs. But I don't know who's going to come out and say, no, Web3 means this and not that. We may very well have to just skip to a Web 4 or 5 to get away from the idea of NFTs. Overwatch 1 permanently being shut down on October 2nd. Yep. Again, yeah, just a ton of armor on everybody. Just everybody really getting a ton of armor, and particularly on this screenshot. Roblox game Adopt Me ends its Netherlands service due to loot box. This is, I assume, a game from the makers of Roblox called Adopt Me, and not a game inside of Roblox. No, it's a game made on the platform of Roblox. Okay. Never heard of it, but yeah, loot boxes being shut down in a few countries. Whereas I imagine a lot of game companies are just going to continue running their business the way they always had and just ignoring the laws of the local lands and just wait until they either get shut down by the government or get fined by the government and maybe never even bother to pay the fines. Ultra Void here. Action game created by a solo South African developer. That's something certainly that would have caught my attention in the old days, but now I take that as potentially just being straight up a lie. It may be true, it may not, but it's not something I can really consider. Looking at this actual game as we do the follow list cleanup, it's in early access. It's been in early access since 2020. It's gotta go. Honestly, if you can't finish your game in the middle of a pandemic, you're never gonna finish a game. Do I want to play anything that has Ukraine in the name is the next question. Even though it's very positive, it's not really my style of game, and yeah, I think I want to say no to that. A, because it has Ukraine in the name, and B, just because it's not my style of game. Bartender from 2019. I kind of want to say yes to this, but I think I'll just leave it on the follow list. And so you're playing as like a real bartender making drinks and I think carding people. If you get fancy, there's technology out there that will just straight up scan driver's license and tell you if they're real or not, but that's extra money and it's potential loss of sales when really you just are trying to avoid being fined. This also early access from 2019. Like you're really just trying not to, when running a bar, serve to minors or serve to people that are going to be so incredibly drunk or that they're going to cause a problem some other way, whether they have a car accident and then you get sued for over serving them, or they cause a fight. This looks interesting, certainly, but do I want to leave it on the follow list? I guess I'm going to leave it on the follow list just until I find another U-boat / submarine simulator that has a chance of being similar. This looks like it's a Wolfenstein game, but it's like Wolfenstein if you didn't have the rights to Wolfenstein. Early access from 2021. November 2021. I'll give it, I mean, that's been about a year, but I'm going to give it another chance. I saw a YouTube commentary video from a creator, and the person brought in another person to talk about Wolfenstein, and this other person described Wolfenstein as having the general premise of picking up guns and fighting tyrants, which is completely inaccurate. And they said the word tyrants multiple times, afraid to say the word Nazis. Which, if you can't say that you pick up guns and shoot Nazis in Wolfenstein games, then the world is lost as far as its sanity is concerned. I guess I'll get rid of this because it's a VR only archery game and it doesn't have a lot of relevancy. Oh, maybe I can't get rid of it. But yeah, there's a big difference between calling people who are right-wing in the United States Nazis and literal Nazis wearing swastikas and SS uniforms set in the time of World War II. Speaking of tyrants, we have a game called Tyrant's Blessing here that I think I'll say no to because it's, I don't think, my style of gameplay. Is this first video just a trailer? Yeah, it seems like it's a positional placement RPG game, although it does seem like it has a decent amount of traps and actions around that. But I think the core gameplay is still a problem there. Speaking of problems, I'm still working on my Wi-Fi, trying to figure out what's wrong with it. Basically, it seems like if I have any of the WMM settings enabled, which is required by standard to have any 5 gigahertz AC or in connections, it runs into problems. So that the quality of service that WMM has seems to be a problem. This typing land, but I don't know how to turn it off or fix it really either. What I'm actively just trying to do is find some settings that will slow down the connection enough that it isn't as big of a deal. And that may be the case, is that I'll just have to slow things down and slow things down in 2 different ways. This typing land, though, is a game. I guess I'll leave it on the follow list until I find a better typing game. Here we have something called Two World Portal that might be good, but definitely isn't relevant. I'll give it more time. And then Two Strikes here is rated very positively and very unique Japanese art style. 2D fighting game. Still early access. And maybe if I was really deep into fighting games and just looking for new fighting games to play, I might even skip the fact that this is an early access. This is very noticeably something that stands out and looks different compared to so many other fighting games, or how you would normally animate a fighting game. So an art style like this really works fairly well. And it's another great example of like having the foreground characters just in black and white and then having the background in color, and that thick black line on the outline of the characters lets them stand out particularly well. And then 2 parsecs from Earth. I assume this is supposed to be a Metroidvania game. We're in a weird position where Metroidvania games are still in desperate need on Steam because there just really aren't that many Metroidvania clones, and all of the Metroid games are exclusive to Nintendo platforms, as it were. So I'll leave that on the follow list too. Let me scroll down through my Twitter feed and see if there's any new news. Otherwise, that's going to be it for this weekend. Hopefully I can get quite a bit done. At a certain point, I probably should try and play some Zelda Breath of the Wild too, but I have other things that are slightly higher priority. Scrolling down my Twitter feed. I imagine there might not be much of anything new to say. If the Tokyo Game Show is still happening, then more announcements would be happening, but right about now would be the time I imagine the Japanese are either asleep or not having presentations. I'd have to remember how the time zone shifts go. Orlando Bloom is also in the Gran Turismo movie. You'll play a hungry marketing exec who's selling the sport of motor racing. Which, okay. Again, I really question whether the Gran Turismo movie is going to be anything other than a clone of Fast and Furious. Perhaps it will be a more grounded Fast and Furious competitor with less movies being about family or being about action sequences. Having not really sat through any of the Fast and Furious movies, scenes I have seen definitely lean more towards action sequences with cars than actual racing or realistic uses of cars in any way. Apparently, it's been confirmed on the Sony's official PlayStation podcast that PlayStation VR games are not compatible with PlayStation VR 2. And that's around 29 minutes and 10 seconds inside the podcast. So, yeah, if you manage to successfully find any PlayStation VR 1 games that you loved, you would potentially have to have the entire setup of the PlayStation VR 1 and 2 if you tried to move up to the PlayStation VR 2. And that lack of backward compatibility almost certainly puts the nail in the coffin for PlayStation VR 2 before it's even out. But I didn't really have a lot of hope that the PlayStation VR 2 was going to be anything anyways. Still scrolling down through my Twitter feed. Yeah, this is the problem certainly of streaming for 3 hours and 40 minutes, is that you potentially are going to have a lot of stuff that may have been announced while you were streaming. And I don't really have a system of breaking news or being interrupted by breaking news. If I had, say, an assistant that was looking at Twitter the whole time, there might be some level in which that could happen, but I don't even know if that's worthwhile. The game Silk Song is coming to the PlayStation as well. Let's see. Street Fighter 6 World Tour opening movie revealed, which I assume that means that is a game opening movie. Yeah. And then all 18 characters of the Street Fighter 6 game series have been revealed, which this guy's pretty much in shadow, so yeah. They're saying 18 characters, not all 18 characters. I added the all. That was a mistake. Apparently, Twitter has bold plans to become the center of the gaming community, but first, it has lessons to learn. This is from Video Game VG 24/7. That being said, Twitter is also attempting to force the sell-off of the Tesla guy. I forget his name now. They're attempting to force him to actually buy Twitter, and or sue him for not buying Twitter. So Twitter can't really have any major plans if half of their plans involve getting a payout by suing somebody who doesn't really want to buy Twitter, and I don't think ever really did want to buy Twitter and was just being a troll. At a certain level, if they do force the Tesla guy to buy Twitter, that might open the floodgates of trying to get more rich people to make ridiculous claims or start the process of acquiring companies. There are definitely other problems though with Twitter and just making it gaming focused. It won't fix that, certainly. I think Twitter inherently had a problem in that it never tried to accrue people who had friends and family that might want to use the service. There is a potential future version of Twitter that they could have made where it took all the features and visuals of Facebook and let people just leave Facebook and not feel the pain of potentially abandoning Facebook completely. So if there was a public side and then a family private side to Twitter, and you could make an easy split there so people could know when they are talking to somebody publicly or privately, that would be where they'd want to go. Also, Twitter could claim that they use your advertising data less than Facebook does, which Facebook almost certainly uses a lot all through the internet. Like, really, Twitter only has to do everything Facebook does, or most of what Facebook does, and do it a little bit better. And they could have convinced a lot of people who have been habitually upset with Twitter, upset with Facebook, to move over to Twitter. Of course, somebody else could certainly do the same thing. You could just make a new Facebook competitor if you have the money, and offer some different service. Anyways, that doesn't really have anything to do with video games, so that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.